Hello there, I'm Barbara Serra. You're at the Listening Post. Coming up this week, the man accused of the world's largest leak of classified files takes to the stand, but where are the media? Watch what you say about the king in Thailand. The country has the harshest lèse-majesté laws in the world. There's been a record number of journalists jailed this year, over 230 and counting. Plus, happy birthday to the GIF, the image format that you've probably never heard of, but have used many, many times. Back in 2010, WikiLeaks burst into the headlines with a series of stories based on millions of leaked, classified U.S. government documents. In the 2.5 years since, the whistleblowing website and its founder-editor, Julian Assange, have become instantly recognizable names in the news. One name is much less well-known, Bradley Manning. He is the U.S. soldier accused of being behind the leaks. Now, just 2 weeks ago, Manning spoke in public for the first time since his arrest in May 2010. The U.S. military is preparing to take Manning to court next year, but they've had to face him in pre-trial hearings over the charges that he was treated unlawfully while in military custody. Now, this should have been an easy story for news editors. An American whistleblower, allegedly the source of many of the most important stories of the past 2 years, speaking for the first time. But the coverage of the pre-trial, particularly in the U.S., has been surprisingly sparse. It's been conspicuous in its absence on the New York Times, which partnered with WikiLeaks on some of its exposés. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now on the treatment of Bradley Manning by both the United States military and the media.
If we accept the argument that Manning is the source of this WikiLeaks information, then we have to assume that Manning is one of the most important sources for journalists in the past 20, 25 years being put on trial for the information that he shared with WikiLeaks and thus with the world.
This was a major legal proceeding. There were witnesses testifying about how decisions about Manning's confinement went all the way up as high as the highest ranks of the Marine Corps headquarters.
It's a very important case, no matter where you fall down on the guilt or innocence of Bradley Manning.
Of the 22 charges against Bradley Manning, the most serious include revealing classified information to unauthorized persons, violating orders, and aiding the enemy. That last charge could lead to life imprisonment for the 25-year-old. In 3 months' time, formal hearings will begin in the case of the United States versus Bradley Manning. But at the pre-trial hearings at Fort Meade military base in late November, it was Bradley Manning putting the U.S. military on trial.
Army Private Bradley Manning is the subject of a military hearing outside of Washington.
A grueling day of cross-examination has just ended.
Manning says his treatment there was so harsh, the charges should be dismissed.
We have unfolding right before our very eyes a first-person account of what U.S. detention of an American citizen looks like in this case. The moment when Manning's attorneys taped off the size of the cell on the courtroom floor to show just how tiny this was one of the most remarkable moments in the trial so far.
There was an outline of a small cell, 6 by 8 feet, and he was standing there walking everyone through what it was like to live inside his cell for the 9 months that he was held at Quantico. He walked us through every aspect of his detainment and provided a lot of details that really journalists just do not know. They had not been shared.
Prior to this testimony of Manning's, the only source that we had for what was actually going on with Manning was from the U.S. government. We had the president coming out and saying that he had been assured by the Pentagon that Manning was being treated like every other detainee.
I have actually asked the Pentagon whether or not the procedures that have been taken in terms of his confinement are appropriate and are meeting our basic standards. They assure me that they are.
And what these hearings made possible is for Manning to come out. He testified for several hours, and he was given the opportunity to actually say for himself how he had been treated.
In the 2.5 years that WikiLeaks has been in the news, its founder, Julian Assange, has become a media magnet. The media attention given to Bradley Manning has been fractional by comparison. For the pre-trial, just 35 journalists obtained accreditation, and only a handful of them attended every day of the hearings. The most notable absence was the New York Times. The paper had been one of the first mainstream news outlets to partner with WikiLeaks when it went public with the Afghanistan and Iraq war logs in 2010. Its absence did not go unnoticed.
I also want to thank the journalists who've been covering the Bradley Manning case. One name you won't hear on that list, the New York Times.
Whether you're talking about what we learned about the Iraq War, whether you're talking about what we learned about the United States in the Afghanistan War, these are all of the revelations that appeared in the New York Times thanks to WikiLeaks and thanks to Bradley Manning's decision to leak that material. The Washington bureau chief of the New York Times said this was a fairly routine hearing, and that's why they hadn't sent a reporter to be on the scene. As Bradley Manning is speaking for the very first time, this is a routine hearing that's absurd on its face, but that was the justification from the so-called paper of record.
Their newspaper's own ombudsman or public editor started complaining about it in her column. You know, how could we take this information, put it out there for public inspection, and then not actually cover the trial of someone who is being accused of practically treasonous behavior when we, the New York Times, have benefited from it. This certainly does raise questions about why they had not been there consistently when they do have a number of reporters whose specialty is national security, and certainly covering military trials is a major part of their brief.
That the New York Times had to be scolded into covering the pre-trial is even more surprising given how it covered a similar story 30 years ago. The whistleblower in question was Daniel Ellsberg, a military analyst who leaked the Pentagon Papers, military documents that revealed how the US war in Vietnam had been prolonged and expanded over 20 years.
Daniel Ellsberg did tell me that he was surprised that they were not covering Bradley Manning's pretrial hearings because they had done a good job of covering his trial. When Ellsberg's trial was dismissed on the basis that the government had acted inappropriately, and the New York Times published that on the front page with a 3-line banner headline entirely across the top of the paper. They really signaled to the reader, this is big news. So clearly the New York Times thought of it as an enormous story.
It was an enormous story, but behind the scenes, the Times and Ellsberg had a rocky relationship. The whistleblower felt the paper wasn't half as enthusiastic about engaging with him when he needed help before his trial. For all the work they do together, whistleblowers and news outlets make bad bedfellows.
The media see whistleblowers, fairly or unfairly, as people who have an agenda. I would argue that sources all have agendas. So media outlets have to weigh these factors very carefully, and I think they're naturally inclined to be somewhat dismissive of whistleblowing sources who they feel like have gone too far in their sort of personal zeal to uncover the truth.
Bradley Manning has been charged under the Espionage Act, the nearly 100-year-old law that was originally passed by the US Congress to prosecute spies. President Obama has charged more federal whistleblowers, 6, under this act than any of his predecessors. On November the 27th, the president did sign into law a new Whistleblower Protection Act, but it makes no allowances for people like Manning.
It excludes national security whistleblowers and it doesn't cover military soldiers. So the people who are actually in positions where they could inform the public on the corruption they are seeing, those people in those positions where they can talk about the surveillance state, they're not allowed to blow the whistle, because if they do and they try to claim this protection, they're going to be silenced.
And given the scant coverage of Bradley Manning's pretrial, the chances don't look good that the media will step up and report on the cases that see their sources, the whistleblowers, in the dock.
Our Global Village voices now on the predicament of Bradley Manning.
News coverage of Bradley Manning's case thus far has been mixed. I'd really encourage journalists interested in covering this case to come down to the courtroom, as I have, to sit in on the court proceedings. That's the only way to really understand all the evidence in this case, and to also better grasp the true importance of this case, not only for the rights of pretrial prisoners, not only for international human rights and justice, but for the future of American investigative journalism.
The Obama administration's record on whistleblowing has been a travesty. and a hypocritical one at that. While President Obama signs a law that's called the National Whistleblower Protection Act, the most prominent whistleblower of our generation is on trial. He's seeking accountability from the military for the torture that he endured in an American prison. It's part of a larger trial in which he could go to prison for life.
Time now for Listening Post News Bites. December 7th was a day of reckoning in the battle between Argentina's president, Cristina Kirchner, and the country's biggest media conglomerate, Grupo Clarín. For now, at least, Clarín can say that it's won. The media company managed to get a last-minute court ruling to postpone the implementation of a vital section of the 2009 broadcast law championed by President Kirchner. Had Article 161 of the law come into force, Clarín would have had to reduce its share in Argentina's media market by nearly 10%. President Kirchner says the law is designed to reform media in Argentina by splitting ownership between public, private, and non-governmental groups. Clarín has challenged the law's antitrust clauses, saying they are unconstitutional, giving the government too much control of the media. The fight is now before the courts. An appeal by the government to dismiss the injunction obtained by Clarín didn't get very far, and both sides now await a ruling on the legality of Article 161. A journalist has been murdered in South Sudan, a sign that the young country's media problems are just getting worse. Isaiah Abraham was shot outside his house in the capital, Juba, by unidentified gunmen. Abraham, an online columnist, wrote for websites like Sudan Tribune, Gurtong, and Sudanese Online. He had a reputation for being tough on the government, criticizing the failure of officials in Juba to work with authorities in Khartoum and encouraging rebel forces. Before his death, Abraham said that there had been threats against his life and anonymous calls warning him to stop writing. Media watch group Reporters Without Borders said his death is a tragic setback to the hopes cherished by South Sudan's defenders of freedom of opinion since independence. The way that this case is handled will be a test for freedom of information and free speech in this young nation. Although Isaiah Abraham's death is the first murder of a journalist in the country, others have been threatened. Reporters Alan Boswell, Taban Bonifacio, and John Maddle-Panther have all been targets of intimidation. For 22 years, the US-based Committee to Protect Journalists has monitored conditions for media professionals right around the world. And 2012 has set a record for the number of journalists behind bars. CPJ has counted 232 journalists in jail for their work. The country with the most imprisoned journalists is Turkey. With a tally of 49, Turkey stands ahead of Iran with its 45 imprisoned journalists and China, where 32 are in jail. This new record represents a jump of 47 on the 1996 record of 185. Many media watch groups around the world have said that CPJ has underestimated the numbers. The group recorded those journalists jailed explicitly for their journalism, but a number of others are arrested on charges unrelated to their work, using anti-terrorism legislation, national security rules, and accusations of corruption. So while the CPJ says Turkey has 49 journalists in jail, the tally from another group, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, says the number is actually 95. So there's no contest that 2012 is a record year for journalists in prison. The only question is, how many more than 232 are in jail? On the 5th of December, thousands of Thais amassed in Bangkok to mark the 85th birthday of their monarch, King Bhumibol Adulyadej. The royal family is an institution of great symbolic power in Thailand, so much so that there's a 100-year-old law that makes it a criminal offense to say or write anything that can be deemed offensive about the members of the royal family. It's known as Article 112, the Lèse Majesté law. Now, in the past 6 years, this piece of legislation has become one of the most potent tools in Thailand's politics. Before 2006, there were about 5 or 6 Lèse Majesté cases a year. In 2010, that number grew to 478. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on Thailand's Lèse Majesté problem.
The protests are still very intense here. The situation has not gotten any better.
The Red Shirt riots of 2010. Thousands in the streets of Bangkok protesting the military coup that deposed Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra in 2006. In Thailand, however, to criticize the coup is to implicitly criticize the king, because as head of state, he had the power to intervene, and he chose not to use it. So protesters were hauled into jail, nearly 500 of them charged with lèse majesté, the crime of insulting the king.
Since the coup in 2006, there have been hundreds of lèse majesté cases. The critics of the law say that since then, it really has been about stifling criticism of the coup and those who were behind it.
Lèse majesté is being used in the king's name as a political tool in political conflicts. In fact, I would go further than that and say that the king is being used by various political factions.
The law itself states that nobody can defame, insult, or threaten the monarch, queen, heir apparent, or regent. The problem is that neither defamation, insult, or even threat are clearly defined in the law. So this loose language effectively has allowed for the abuse of these laws.
The lèse majesté laws work as a kind of dragnet for political activists in Thailand. Anyone can be swept up. Chanin Klaiklang was a military man in the Thai Air Force. In 2010, he was suspended for posting allegedly offensive comments about the royal family on Facebook. How offensive, we don't know, and even if we did, we could be breaking Thai law by reporting it. Even reporting the specifics of lèse majesté allegations can potentially land you in legal trouble. Something like that happened to Pravit Rojanafruk, a journalist working for the Thai paper The Nation. Rojanafruk wrote about the need to reform the lèse majesté laws and found himself in an interrogation room with the police. His articles were taken offline, and although there were no formal charges, it was the kind of case that creates a climate of fear.
There are many implications for the media when it comes to reporting about the royal family and about the lèse majesté laws. If someone is convicted of insulting the royal family under the lèse majesté laws, we cannot report what that person did in the first place to be arrested for those crimes. And one of the implications of that is that the public don't really know the boundaries of what they can and can't say.
The line changes all the time. And that's something about lèse majesté. You can never tell whether you're committing lèse majesté or not. For example, I am in exile in Britain because I wrote an anti-coup d'etat book criticising the 2006 military coup.
Supporters of the law say lèse majesté has been misunderstood. We spoke to Tulsiti Somwang, who heads a pro-royal family political party called the Multicolored Group.
The objective, Article 112, is to protect the beloved king. Its objective is to protect the peace of the society, not to stop the freedom of expression. They may say that it's a political tool, but in fact it's not. It's just the ordinary people that love and would like to protect their beloved king.
Those who disagree with that point of view say not only is Article 112, the lèse majesté law, difficult enough to deal with in its original form, but what happened in 2007 made it worse. It was the passing of the Computer Crimes Act. It took the lèse majesté law and applied it to the online world.
The 2007 Computer Crime Act is arguably some of the most draconian legislation in the world governing the internet. It effectively has given the authorities a new tool to pursue and punish any anti-monarchy sentiment that is published online. And authorities have used this law with a vengeance. In particular, the executive editor of an online website known as Prachathai, Shiranut Premchaiporn, she was charged for comments that were posted anonymously to her website's web board.
I didn't expect it will happen. The Computer Crime Act is a new law, and there are the limit understanding about technologies. There are limit understanding about how this law will be enforced. Unfortunately, the verdict is not come in favor of me. So it's confirmed that if you be a webmaster or you be just an intermediary of some website and someone posts anything in your website, you can face these kinds of problems. And this is how to say, it's like accelerate the worrying trend of the lèse-majesté.
The lèse-majesté law has a pervasive impact on journalism. When we tried to book a local camera crew to film this report for us in Bangkok, it wasn't easy because even speaking to someone about lèse-majesté can be career-limiting in Thailand. The camera crew that shot the pictures in the report you're watching agreed to work with us on the condition that we would not reveal who they are. And the thing about lèse-majesté is this: you don't even have to be charged by the authorities to be sentenced.
Any Thai citizen can file lèse-majesté charges against any other Thai citizen for something they may have said in a restaurant or mumbled in a movie theater. The royal family, through the Constitution, are not allowed to file these cases themselves, so it is incumbent upon the government to follow up these cases.
The problem beyond that is that everyone in the chain, the police who investigate the allegation, the lawyers involved, the judges in the courts, feel obliged to push the cases through because they fear that if they don't push this through and convict the people, then they too will be accused of being disloyal to the monarchy.
This is a law which is exact opposite to freedom of speech. It cannot be reformed. The prison terms are outrageous. People at the moment are in prison for 20 years for making statements. It's actually a law which protects dictatorship. You have to abolish lèse-majesté. And whether or not Thailand has a monarchy or not is another matter.
More Global Village Voices now on Thailand's lèse-majesté law.
Thailand's lèse-majesté law needs to be urgently reviewed by the Thailand's parliament because it is a law which is being used to curtail freedom of speech and expression in the country. It is very important to support the proposal of several individuals and groups to immediately review this lèse-majesté law, which some experts have been calling as the world's harshest.
The most dangerous element of the lèse-majesté law is definitely that basically everyone can file charges against a wide range of people. If we look at the UK or the Netherlands, we see that they have rare cases, and if they have a case, then the violations are about $100 or $200 in fines, while the Thai government is threatening with up to 18 years of jail term.
And finally, here's one for all the computer geeks out there. You've probably heard of the JPEG, the PNG, and the TIFF image formats that allow us to save all those million-pixel holiday photos in our computers without pushing the hard drive into overdrive. Well, the one format that you're probably less familiar with is actually the founding father of all image formats, the GIF, Graphics Interchange Format, invented way back in 1987. Now, our IT departments say that they're over the GIF, it's too 20th century for them. Well, we beg to differ. The GIF image is 25 years old this week, and we found a video celebrating its birthday. Directed by Sean Pecknold, A Short History of the GIF chronicles the format's journey from the late 1980s through to today's multi-platform media world using GIF animations. It's our video of the week. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time here at the Listening Post.